It's the holiday season, and I'm on a boat somewhere in the Andaman Sea. So today, instead of the daily snark, the thundering hordes of litigators, Bundlegate, rods, queeners and beefs, Tim Hortons honey crullers, nine-toed cats, blaming private equity, and Swedes writing the best songs, we have some guest episodes. We've got some axe grinders on tap, but we've also got episodes of other podcasts that we think are swell, and even a few episodes of a podcast we made with Pop Cult Worldwide. Today's guest episode comes from podcast big bro Larry Miller of NYU Steinhardt and the Sony Audio Institute. It's the latest episode of his Musonomics podcast, in which he talks to the movers and shakers who are innovating and tracking innovation in the music industry. If you like what you hear today, head on over to where you get your pods, find Musonomics, and hit subscribe. This episode is called What's a Superfan, and it was edited by yours truly. Here it is.
So often people kind of see superfans as this mystical revenue stream where hopefully that's where all the money is, but no one is really understanding how to engage with these fans.
Welcome to Musonomics. I'm Larry Miller from the Music Business Program at NYU Steinhardt and the Sony Audio Institute. It's almost impossible to have a conversation about the music business without discussing super fandom these days. Perhaps only AI can compete with superfan as the music industry buzzword of the year for 2025. And as streaming growth in the largest markets has leveled off in the past year, the industry is frantically searching for ways to keep growing. And when you can't grow horizontally, it's time to go vertical and start mining the most active music fans for more revenue. Everybody's jumping on this craze. Online music services like Tencent in China are experimenting with super VIP tiers. Distributors are adding services and partnerships. Labels are once again trying to capture 360 degrees of revenue. Direct-to-fan models are proliferating as startups that cater to the needs of these superfans are emerging. And with all of these rapid developments, there are still a lot of questions. What is a superfan? Who's best to manage the superfan relationship? The digital service providers, the distributor, the label, the artist? And where is the line between superfan services and superfan exploitation? We're not going to answer all of these questions in a single podcast episode, but as a start, we thought it would be a good idea to speak with someone watching the space and somebody in the space. Olivia Jones from Media Research is watching the space, and Mag Rodriguez, the CEO of direct-to-fan platform Even, is in the space, and they both have a lot to share. I spoke with Olivia, and our contributor and grad student Mariel Darling spoke with Mag. We'll start with my conversation with Olivia Jones. Olivia, welcome back to Musonomics.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Music and more broadly entertainment consumption has been shifting from buying physical things like shiny things that spin toward the streaming-driven economy now for many years. What motivated media to redefine super fandom this year?
So what we found is that a lot of people kind of talk about super fans, especially in music, but not everyone has a sort of set idea of what a super fan is. So a lot of people are giving different definitions, but there isn't really a standardized industry-wide definition. So what we thought was that it would be great for all of us to just be able to figure out what it means to be a super fan. And our Defining Entertainment Superfans report is kind of serving as a Genesis report for kind of the next year, where we're going to be exploring other aspects of super fandom across entertainment. But this was setting that foundation for what a super fan is, how they engage, so that we can get into the deeper dives, the nitty gritty with the other reports without having to lay that base every single time.
Okay, so how do you define an entertainment superfan?
So we define a superfan as a consumer who spends above average time and above average money on entertainment weekly. So we have a term, in music specific, we have the music aficionados, but this kind of goes across entertainment, people who spend above average time and money on gaming, on audiobooks, podcasts, TV, and movies. So also we break it down past that into how people spend their time and money. We have, of course, the specific super fan that's time and money, but then we have collectors who are above average money, but not really time as much. Or we have the what we call forgotten fans, which are above average time, but not as much money. We have people who are focusing on merch, people who are focusing on creating. So we have that solid definition. But beyond that, there's so many different branches that it can veer off into.
I think we understand what it means when we're talking about a super fan who's engaging with merch, right? They're buying physical things, whether that's a t-shirt or a hoodie or even a vinyl record. But what do we mean when we're talking about co-creation?
How we define it is any super fan or just fan who is engaging with the media they're a fan of by creating or posting content that is related to that entertainment, or we have making their own version, so that counts as remixes of songs, covers of songs, parodies, fan writing, anything like that. I think in video games you have specifically people who are making mods and just anything that kind of takes the original piece of entertainment and iterates on it in their own way.
And your observation is that music super fans are different from film and TV or gaming super fans. What about film and TV? How are music super fans different?
What we saw is that, of course, film and TV, a lot of people, they're more often interacting with the original media when it comes to film and TV. And we also saw that for film and TV fans, a lot of times they're interacting with it IRL versus being online. Like gaming fans are more likely to be engaging in an online community space, but film and TV, they're showing up for special showings, fan experiences, which have become a bigger thing in that. And then also just kind of talking about the media. So you'll see things like podcasts that are talking about a TV show. They're taking that time to share their own theories, share their own stories, and that is how a lot of people are engaging with that media.
So let's focus then on music. You've helped define that there are a small number of music archetypes. What are they?
So we found that about 28% of consumers really identify as music fans. And the ways that they really engage are, of course, spending time on it. But the other big way is that we saw them as an archetype for what we call IRL fans. So these are, of course, showing up for concerts, but now we're also seeing themed club nights or fan experiences, like we've seen Spotify doing things like artist exhibits and things like that. So these people, they're craving that IRL community, and that is something that we're seeing that is specific to music fans. They're really showing up in person and want to build that community in real life.
How are managers, artist managers, and record labels engaging these different archetypes differently?
Part of the reason behind the report is that we're trying to give advice for how to better engage these different archetypes, because we see too often people are seeing super fans as just super fans, as that monolith. So we're hoping that they can see them as different archetypes, not exactly the same, and within forms of entertainment, there are different types of music fans, not just like a music fan, comma, general. We're hoping that they can meet these fans where they already are and find ways to engage them. That also, a big thing we're seeing is the unfortunate pricing out of fans, where a lot of music fans, since they're engaging IRL, of course, concerts are that big thing, but often concert tickets are becoming more expensive. So then not every fan can engage in that way, but the appetite is still there.
Right, especially
So
for the biggest artists in the world who are facing pretty much infinite demand for a finite number of tickets. And I imagine that fans and super fans of the artist in particular feel like they deserve to be able to buy a ticket, assuming that they can afford one.
yes, I think that IRL doesn't always have to mean a concert. So I think the rise of these, what I call it, IRL fan experiences where the artist isn't there, where the the idea is for fans to engage with each other, kind of spreading that community of being a fan of the artist, but it's not so much an artist to fan connection that they're facilitating in that moment, but a fan to fan connection with a shared interest. And so I think that that is a rising area where I think we hopefully will see some more growth, especially for some of these big artists who, of course, they aren't touring all the time. Or if they are touring, the tickets can be expensive. They might not come to, they obviously can't come to every single fan's town. So creating more opportunities for fans to engage in real life without it having to be a specific type of event like a concert.
Streaming music is about 85% of the revenue that accrues to record companies, anyway, in the United States. And does streaming undervalue super fandom?
I think it does because obviously you're seeing the price of a subscription. Everyone is paying that 11.99, 12.99. But the same person who could pay that subscription and then they might forget that they had a music subscription, or they might be listening to a couple songs a month versus a super fan who is streaming every day. They're streaming a specific artist more than other artists. The revenue that they're generating is about the same. So there isn't really a delineation between fandom when it comes to streaming because it's kind of flattened out the consumption. So everyone is paying the same amount of money, but they might not be using that service the same way.
Just as well, if everybody's paying the same amount of money, then, labels and artists are leaving money on the table. Are you seeing the Spotify's and the Apple Musics and the other on-demand streaming services moving towards offers of differentiated value and access and products, or is that happening more outside the streaming services?
Of course, we have the Supremium things that people are hinting at offering. We haven't seen as much of that really manifest yet. Already, we are seeing on the kind of the Chinese streaming services, so kind of Tencent music platforms, they have created a framework for delineating super fans, the SVIP tiers, they call them, that get different qualities and features such as badges, ways to interact with their favorite artists, and things like that for an added fee each month. But often we're seeing a lot of these in the Western spheres, at least. We're seeing a lot of these elevated experiences for fans come from outside of streaming, where streaming is the baseline. That's where, of course, people are listening to the music, but any added value we're seeing come from the live space or from selling merch, other things with artist branding. They're referred to as expanded rights.
Any conversation about the music industry in 2025 can't really be a conversation without mentioning super fandom and AI. Are AI tools changing fandom in terms of what fans are able to create and post and how they're engaging with artists?
Yeah, so I think that AI is really accelerating how fans can create. So I think now the barriers to entry for being a creator are lower. Now fans can kind of interact with their favorite entertainment in different ways. We're also seeing, especially in the music space, being able to modify the sound that you're listening to. So now fans are getting to be a part of the music creation by using AI to remix the sounds that they're hearing, to change it for specific moods and things like that. So that's bringing them into the creator space.
How can labels and digital service providers change what their offerings are in order to better leverage the super fandom dynamic?
The biggest part comes down to knowing what fans want and offering them services that they would want and would use. So often people kind of see super fans as this mystical revenue stream where hopefully that's where all the money is, but no one is really understanding how to engage with these fans. So they're often throwing features at fans, but the fans aren't engaging with them, and then the question kind of comes, what's happening? Maybe fans aren't engaging anymore, but the fans are engaging, it's just in different spaces, and they do often don't take kindly to people coming into their space and trying to act like one of them. So I think the biggest need is for people to listen to fans, speak with fans, and kind of get that perspective rather than trying to engineer a perspective from the business side.
And fans and superfans are different across different types of artists. And you did a pretty big study that you released just last month that talked about how different types of superfans are. What did you observe?
Yeah, so what we saw was that superfans, they really differed in forms of, spend, how much time they spend, how much money they spend. And we saw things like some of the nicher types of entertainment. For instance, the podcast, they had the highest average annual spend on entertainment they're a fan of. So we saw that the fans, specifically with regards to entertainment and how they engage, it's different. They had different platforms that they interact with, where gaming fans would of course interact with platforms like Discord and Twitch, but music fans, they aren't interacting there as much. So it kind of gives some insight into how to reach those fans within those communities rather than just how to reach fans as a whole.
But within even just talking about music super fandom, how do different communities vary in terms of the relative strength of different ways of reaching those fans, especially as we think about artists that have been around for a long time, like Madonna and Coldplay, versus an artist like Taylor Swift. Well, Taylor Swift has now been around for kind of a long time, maybe a bad example, versus an artist like Charlie XCX, say, or Chapel Rowan.
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of the kind of newer artists like that, Charlie XCX, Chappell Roan. I'll even include kind of Billie Eilish in there. These artists have higher engagement on social media than some of the older artists, where obviously, Madonna's from a pre-social media era, so you wouldn't expect all of her fans to be engaging on Instagram all the time. But we're also seeing some issues with these newer fans of artists. They're fans of more of a scene, of a vibe. So we found super fans who listen to Charlie XCX daily. These are people who specifically identified as super fans of Charlie XCX. A certain percentage listen to her daily, but that same percentage listen to other artists daily. And these artists were, of course, of a kind of similar sound, similar genre, where now instead of being a super fan of an artist, more younger consumers are a super fan of a style, of an aesthetic, and the artists fit into that aesthetic. It's not artist specific, but vibe specific.
Looking ahead, how do you see this evolving? What does the fan economy in music look like in 2030?
That, of course, is always evolving, so it's hard to exactly pinpoint it. But I would say that what we're seeing is, of course, physical is still going to be an aspect, but I think we're starting to see it peak and start to recede again, where there will be more offerings of kind of digital type merch for fans. So ways for them to show their fandom on the social media and online spaces that they're participating in the fandom on. So we're seeing hopefully things like badges for fans, specific fan memberships that allow them access to these specific spaces and allow them to advertise their fandom across the internet. So I think that will be a big aspect of it. Of course, there's the whole AI conversation. Will there be AI artist chatbots? I think that will certainly be a part, but I do not think it will be as big a factor in fandom as people might think it will be, since I think such a big part of fandom is that authenticity. I think that no matter what, even as the technology evolves, that craving for authenticity will still be there, even in 2030. That's the reason that they're a fan, and that's kind of what they're aiming for. So things will change, but that need for authenticity and connection won't. This, of course, is just the start of the conversation on fandom. So at Media, that's going to be a big focus of our next year. We're also going to be looking at fandom drivers for things like merch and live, going into those archetypes of IRL fans and merch focused fans. Why are they buying this merch? Why are they going to these concerts? How many, both on a quantitative sense of how many tickets are they buying, but also in a qualitative sense of why are they buying these tickets? Why are they going to more concerts, less concerts, or buying different types of merch? Our reports of this year have kind of been laying that foundation, but it's really only the tip of the iceberg. So we're only going to get deeper and give more complex insights into what super fandom is.
Okay, Olivia, thanks for joining us again on Musonomics.
Yes, thank you for having me. This is great.
Moving over from theory into practice, Mariel Darling sat down with Mag Rodriguez from Even to see what the landscape looks like down in the trenches of superfan engagement. Mariel, over to you.
Hi, Mag. Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Well, welcome. And as a user of your platform, I'm a singer-songwriter and content creator. Very excited to speak with you. My first question is, what was the core insight or pain point that led you to create Even?
Well, short story, I was a manager first. Well, the producer turned a manager, I should say. And I just got really lucky in high school. Two of my classmates were incredible artists. I went on to manage one of them for a little bit over 6 years. And that was kind of like my initial experience in the music industry, but also the reality of like what it means to be an artist, especially while streaming was really picking up. This is before Apple Music. Most of the releases that were happening at the time, at least like within our niche, which was like SoundCloud rap, was happening on SoundCloud. So we weren't even distributing to the streaming platforms. And the artist at the time that I was managing was actually one of the early cohorts that was being onboarded to Spotify and then Apple Music. And we had a lot of early success, but there was really a promise when it came to streaming. And a lot of it was just like, at the time, Spotify was very much a startup and the industry had just gone through a massive shift. And it really exposed us to what streaming could be. And I drank that Kool-Aid for a long time, honestly, to be fully transparent. And then in 2018, I started working for a venture fund that wanted to build programming with artists and managers. And I spent close to 5 years with that firm awarding artists and managers grants. And I was basically giving them the information that I had learned in my early days of my career. And a lot of it was tied to streaming, optimized for streaming, all discovery on social pushed them to streaming. But the promise of streaming didn't really live up to the expectation. And sometime around 2020, 2021, I, among other people, essentially identified that streaming was going to hit a ceiling. There's only so many people that want the all-you-can-eat buffet of streaming. And it turns out that that is now the reality in 2025. So around that time, I started writing a white paper. It was The Music Industry Needs to Get Even. And a lot of it was tied to the research that I have found primarily around D2C businesses outside of music. So really the emergence of Shopify and how before Shopify, there was less than 100,000 businesses on the internet making real revenue. And after Shopify, now there's millions. And I was like, what if we built that for artists? And the twist was, what happens if we do it before streaming? And I always use the movie theater analogy where Even is the movie theater if Spotify was Netflix. So that was a really long, short story, hopefully, but it kind of gives you a sense of how we got here today.
So I was going to ask, how did you come up with the name? And it sounds like you answered that question from that paper that you wrote.
Yeah, honestly, I had the name before the company, and I always credit the founders of Generator, which were my former bosses and now investors. They, at the time when I was writing this, like, mostly just like a document with a bunch of ideas, they were like, there's something there in this Even company, and they kept calling it Even, and I just kind of stuck, and it became the name. And now it's Probably the number one compliment we get from folks is they really love the name.
Yeah, I'm so about branding, so I loved that. So I guess to go off of what you were saying, kind of the movie theater idea and like the buy before you stream model that you guys have, how does that change the way that artists earn from their music and how fans access that content, super fans specifically?
Yeah, so it was interesting because we do consider ourselves a super fan platform. I think in the music industry or like the trade magazines and trade websites, I should say, we always consider ourselves not only as a super fan platform, but we're also the first and only super fan platform that reports sales to the charts. So we are a data reporter for Luminate, which reports sales to the Billboard charts. And it's a unique value prop that we offer the industry because it is something that primarily labels and artists really care about. But as far as the consumer behavior for Even, we built Even as an infrastructure that provides a seamless experience for artists to be able to sell direct to fans. So starting on the artist side, before Even to sell direct to fan, you had to build a website, which required time, energy, and money. Most artists just have energy. They don't have a ton of time and they don't have a ton of money, especially in the early stages of their career. So we wanted to build something that was seamless for them, where it built around their release schedules. We're not telling artists to build a new release strategy of like unreleased demos. It's like if you have a body of work that you're about to release out to the world, before you give it away for free to streaming platforms, sell it to your fans first and make it an opportunity for them to not only support you, but also have direct proximity and access to you. So we made that very seamless and easy for artists simply by partnering with distributors and labels. So most artists already work with like a United Masters or a Two Loss. So we've made it very seamless for them to just go to one place to do everything. And that's how artists essentially join Even, is just by going to their distributor of choice, asking them, hey, I want to use Even, and then they get access to the platform. Now, on the fan side, we understand that consumers are now buying things primarily from social. So most times consumers are finding about clothing brands or even food through an announcement or maybe a reel that they saw on Instagram. So for us, it was really strategic to make sure that the storefronts around these releases lived natively inside of social. So it's a link in bio where 90% of our transactions are actually happening within the Instagram, TikTok, or X browser, where it's not trying to send fans to leave the app or download a new app. We've made it very seamless to exist within that ecosystem, which is something that the social platforms prefer. They don't want people to leave the app to go to another app. And a lot of that was through the frustrations of pre-saves. I remember when I was a manager, I never really understood pre-saves when they were launching. It was like, okay, we're promoting a new release, sending fans off of social to go and pre-save something, but they get nothing in return for doing that. And for me, it was like, there has to be a new model. So for us, that new model was, instead of pre-saving, just buy it now and get access to it now and make it very easy for those fans to just check out with Apple Pay or Google Pay or Cash App. I mean, we even support like Klarna and Affirm. You know, these are the ways that consumers, especially Gen Z, are buying things on the internet. And we offer all of that to our artist partners.
Sounds like you got on it before TikTok Shop did. And to that point about spending and whatnot, with such a generational change, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, that big generation of super fandom engaging with music right now, how do you see that in your platform differently than older listeners?
So I'm 31 now. I'm a millennial. We remember what it felt like to buy music. So it's like a nostalgia element. A lot of people my age are now in a position where they have possibly a job and are making good money. And they're like, I'm going to go and buy my favorite artist. I remember buying music and it feels like something I used to do and it feels good. Now we're also noticing millennials and younger, there's an element around conscious consumerism. This trend really picked up about 10 years ago, but we're noticing that Gen Z in particular and millennials really enjoy spending their money when they know it's going to a good place. So there's this kind of element where like, I rather go to a local coffee shop than a Starbucks. I rather go to a local store, a chain. So I think we're seeing that element where even offers that conscious consumer an opportunity to say, hey, I know where my dollars are going by buying a release on Even. And it's a core part of our messaging where it's like buy the art from the artist. Now, what we're noticing about like the younger generations is buying access and community is already baked into their consumer behaviors. A lot of these younger generations are on Discord, they're on Roblox, on Fortnite. They enjoy spending money for experiences and proximity to a community of people that like the same things as they do. And we really see that shine on the platform through our community chat or virtual release parties, where every release has a baked in community chat where fans can talk to each other. We see that through we have an artist, Lauren Jarebi, who's a big pop star from a group called Fifth Harmony. She's rolling out her solo career through Even, and her fans are in over 100 countries, and they all come together to support her, buy her music, and engage with each other. Where we can argue, are they paying for the music or are they paying for proximity to Lauren? And I think in many cases it's both, but it's really mostly that proximity and access to the artist and the community that she has built around her.
Conscious consumerism. Do you think that and commercial success can still coexist?
100%. I think both can be true. I think a lot of it too is like defining commercial success or what it means today. I think the industry has really moved towards that like streaming mass distribution model around like how do we get the most eyes and impressions around content. And music in many ways is kind of mirroring that when we think about like monthly listeners, total amount of streams, a number one on Billboard. But I think what ends up happening is if you focus too much on that, it's really hard to build sustainable communities around an artist and true fandom because you're just trying to sell, grow, put stuff in front of people's faces. And it comes off inauthentic to the audience. And I think that's where words like industry plan come. And I think when we think about 2016 through the pandemic into, I would say even in the last like 2 years, we're started to see that shift where community and fandom is coming back. We're seeing labels manage fan Instagram profiles and the fan communities on Twitter, the Discords. We're seeing labels and distributors and teams really putting an investment around community. And in many cases, that starts with the artists themselves. Like you look at a Doja Cat who built her career going live on Instagram like every day and engaging with her audience, talking to her fans, making music in front of them. I think there's a lot of those examples where the superstar of today really navigated the mass distribution model of social and impressions and streams, etc., but in a way that still felt authentic to their audience, where they can still have a direct communication with their fans.
Totally. How does Even balance giving fans that early access, that exclusivity that gives them that little rush? Oh my God, I get this before everybody else, with also preserving the value of the streaming of the release?
I think for us, it's primarily in the model being, it's not even or streaming, it's even and streaming. And I think a good example of that is, let's look at like how Hollywood operates. A film will go to movie theaters for 2-3 weeks, maybe even a month. And that's an opportunity for audiences to have to earn the right to have an opinion on that film. And I think that's something that Hollywood, although they faced a lot of some of the same things that we saw in music, like piracy, they continue to commit energy around like the theatrical releases, primarily around a global level. Theatrical releases is still pretty prominent, primarily around the global South. I think Western markets, we just kind of take it for granted because we have so many options, Netflix, Hulu, Apple TV, etc. But I do think the element around like releasing something, making it available only to people who want to pay to have an opinion, also experience the film and then talk about it, those people become the marketing driver. When people go and see that there's a new film in theaters, it makes them go back and look at the catalog of films. Do I want to pay to see the new Spider-Man movie? Do I want to pay to see the new whatever X movie? They'll go and watch one of the old ones. And next thing you know, you see it all over your Netflix in the top 10 films. So it ends up being that same thing we're seeing in Even, where an artist will release an album. They'll say, buy it from me. It'll be on streaming in 2, 3 weeks or maybe a month from now. And next thing you know, we'll see a streaming uptick happen because fans go say, all right, do I really want to pay $10, $20 for this album? Let me go listen to their last album and see how I feel. And then from there, they'll make that decision and then go buy the album. So we're actually seeing an uptick. Artists are still receiving editorial playlisting. They're still seeing that commercial success. There's only so many opportunities on a playlist on the streaming platforms where I think artists stopped trying to make that their release strategy. There was a period in time where like the release strategy was like, can we get on New Music Friday and Rap Caviar or Anti-Pop? I mean, you name it. We know all the playlists. And after artists started receiving those looks and then they realized that that wasn't a real way to build a sustainable career, but also a fan base, they started looking at other ways. And I think that's really where Even comes in. Even shouldn't replace your streaming strategy. It should only complement your streaming strategy.
Do you see the fans coming back for multiple releases?
Yeah, all the time. Honestly, I think that's probably been the most surprising part of the business. Discovery was never a core part of Even. We actually are barely making our first marketing hire at the moment. We don't even have a marketing department. So all the like repeat fans who are buying other releases on the platform are fans who are like just sticking around, following us on social media. We have a couple 100,000 followers across all of our socials. And that was just from fans having an enjoyable experience. We have a net promoter score of over 80 on the platform, which is unheard of when we think about like traditional tech. So I think fans are really enjoying that experience, but they're also talking about it. We love seeing like tags on Instagram or Twitter where fans are telling their favorite artists, you should drop this on Even. And honestly, that's how most of our releases are happening on the platform. It's either they saw another artist using Even or a fan or fans were messaging them, telling them you should release on Even. So it is a core part of our strategy moving forward to like really incubate that fan community to like want to buy multiple releases, but it's happening organically at the moment.
On the tech side, how does your platform differ from other prior direct to fan models, and how would Even really define access or like a super fan offer?
I think the first one is like, how do we compare to other platforms? I think the initial differentiator is that we're not trying to replace any existing platforms that came before Even. I think, for example, like let's use the biggest one in the space, right? Bandcamp. One of the number one questions that we get from artists is like, well, I use Bandcamp. Can I still use Bandcamp and Even? And we're like, 100%. You should use both. You know, you shouldn't feel like you have to choose one or the other. Artists say, I want to build my own website. And we're like, you should 100% build your own website. There's just elements of Even that make it more seamless. And they're primarily tied to the community and access element. We're not just selling music. We're helping artists sell community, access, experiences. So I think that's really the differentiator. But we would never tell an artist to choose us against another platform. That's just never been a part of our messaging because we don't think that that's fair for artists. Like that for us is really our core value prop.
Yeah, totally. Looking ahead a little bit, do you see any risks emerging
As a company or in the space in general?
in the space?
Yeah, I think the biggest risk that I think we're facing is the industry is going through a very interesting shift. There's mass layoffs happening. Everyone in music is being overworked and underpaid. And I think a lot of that is through just no one really knows what's next. I think the music industry has been relying on streaming and that number growing and growing. And all of a sudden it hit the brakes and like growth is no longer there. So it's leaving a lot of people scrambling. But I think this is the biggest opportunity for artists to say, hey, you know what? It's time for us to get back on the driver's seat and do the thing that we've always known. I think every artist and every great artist that I've ever worked with has really focused on that direct relationship. And I use an example of this Lil Russell, that first artist that released on the platform. We've done now, I think, like 15 to 16 releases with him on the platform. And he's not a major streaming artist. This is an artist that has maybe between 200,000 to 300,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, but he just sold 300 $1,000 tickets for a backyard show at his house based on purely incubating and really owning that relationship with his fans. But we're also seeing baby artists like Anaya Kobe, who makes $9 a year from streaming and made $350 on the platform in her first release, or Queen Dree from Chicago, who makes $100 a year from streaming and made $900 her first day on the platform. We're seeing artists at every level, where we also have global superstars like Lauren Jareggi and J. Cole, who their positioning on using Even is less revenue driven. It's more about owning that relationship with their fans. So I think for us, it's really about that element of owning and being on the driver's seat. And while vanity metrics have been great for the business because they look good on paper.
So it sounds like you're creating even more super fans by having these different artists at different levels of their career. These fans are able to maybe initially go onto the platform to listen to people like J. Cole, but then are finding these smaller artists and kind of spreading that super fan love.
That's exactly it. I always tell folks that like the traditional super fan is actually the smallest consumer base on Even. Most of the fans buying releases are the ones that saw it on social and they're like, I really like X artist, and oh, Apple Pay, cool. It almost feels like I'm not spending money. I got early access to it. You know, if they buy the album digitally for early access, they'll buy the vinyl, and then they'll buy the t-shirt, and then they'll buy the ticket, and then they become super fans.
Do you think the vulnerability and the like authentic storytelling as a marketing tool for these artists is showing through your platform?
Yeah, 100%. For the artists that want that, I do think there's also an element to be said that Even isn't for everyone. Going direct to fan and owning the relationship with fans, it is work, right? It is an extra element that needs to be managed, and it requires it to be authentic. This isn't something your manager can manage. This isn't something that a friend can manage. This requires the artist to really buy in for it to really be impactful. So it does require that buy-in from the artist. So while Even can't work for any artist at any stage, it will require the artist to want to be there.
Superfan has such a connotation to it. How do you see the line between fan and friends, especially on your platform or social media?
I'll give you the straight up answer, which is if you're a baby artist that's barely getting started, your first super fan will be your community and family, right? Like these are going to be your true super fans. And I would argue that everyone's mom and dad is probably going to be a super fan forever, whether they're a baby artist or a global superstar. Give them an opportunity to support you in a way that it doesn't feel like charity or a donation. I've owned different types of businesses in my lifetime. And, you know, I love when a friend opens up a new business and they do a friends and family opening where like it's exactly that. Your first customers, whether you're opening up a restaurant or you're launching your music career, they will be your friends and family and immediate community. That doesn't mean you have to give it away for free. In many ways, like that extra $500, the extra $1,000 that you might make from that community, you can now invest in marketing tools to like expand that reach.
And it's also nice to know as a fan where your money is exactly going. So it seems that there's more of a almost like a kindness and a kinship of Even users and that kind of super fan that's willing to actually be like, oh, here is $10 for this instead of, oh, I'm just streaming your song 10,000 times.
Yep, 100%.
I listened to another podcast that you were on, and you were talking about how I'm pretty sure it was 8,000 people you were allowing a day into that app. Have you since then upped that? Are you planning to?
You know, I always talk about this. I regret even mentioning that because I think I said it in like, it was a thing that I said because it was happening to us. And then it was interesting because my CTO then pulled me aside and was like, Mag, we might not be ready to keep that going. So we're doing it in waves now. So for example, just 3 weeks ago, we let 400,000 artists and labels into the platform, but that's still being done in batches. So right now we're on track to onboard over 2 million artists before the end of the year. The funny thing, it does average out to about 8,000 a day, but it's not happening at 8,000 a day. that just was going to kill my client services team.
My last question is a bit of a cliche one, but where do you see even in 5 years in relation to how the superfan market is going to change, but also just the growth of the company in general?
I want to help 1 million artists make $1,000 a year extra, right? Like that to me, it's really like the North Star. If we can help artists, 1 million artists, make $1,000 on average for release, I think that will flip the industry like upside down a little bit, right? Right now, we're working in an industry where close to 90% of artists on streaming aren't even making $1. Nothing beats working with an artist who's never made money from music and they make their first 50, 100, 1,000 on even. So that's really our North Star and really where we're building the product. And I think to add to that is like we want to open up even to non-music creators. Every day we get reached out by like podcasters and content creators and filmmakers. And while we've done non-music releases, they've always been tied to a music artist. It is something that we would like to open up to the wider creator community, but we have one job at hand right now, which is helping artists, and that's going to be our main focus for a little bit.
Thanks to Olivia Jones from Media Research and Mag Rodriguez from Even for chatting with us. The music industry's superfan journey is still in its early days, and we expect we'll be revisiting it in future episodes. This Musonomics podcast was executive produced by me, Larry Miller, with help from Leela Errol and Marielle Darling, and edited by our pal Lars Murray, the same Lars Murray who produces and hosts Unlimited Supply, the music industry's weekday TLDR 5-minute briefing on business, technology, and finance. From the Music Business Program at NYU Steinhardt and the Sony Audio Institute, I'm Larry Miller. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to that guest episode of Musonomics here at Unlimited Supply. If you want to listen to more Musonomics episodes and get some new ones right in your feed, head over wherever you get your podcasts, find Musonomics, and hit subscribe. I'm Lars Murray. You're listening to Unlimited Supply, your daily music business TLDR. And remember, in this business, no conflict means no interest.